Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for your time and welcome to the introduction of the Fanvil PA3 SIP paging gateway. This is not a brand new product. In fact, it is an absolute follow-up to an existing device that we've been publishing and manufacturing for the voice and telecom community for many years. And what we found out in making the PA3 is that the bulk of the deployment in a broadcasting has to do with voice. Obviously, the PA2 was sort of like a Swiss Army knife in many cases where it supported a hard physical video link, and it also provided many of the audio links. But as the broadcasting performance demands started increasing, we put together a device that really focuses in more on the audio portion and improving the performance of that broadcasting feature. So as many of you know, deploying SIP, Session Initiation Protocol, into society, the most popular application is voice communication, hence IP telephones. And what we found out is that in deploying these telephones, there are other different endpoints that were connected via analog that really weren't addressed with telephones and is best suited to be able to perhaps put in a SIP core that enables a new hosted or on-prem PBX to access those analog or actually digital endpoints that were not SIP compliant. So when you upgrade a building or upgrade an office into SIP, then what you end up having is now you have these tools that give you the capability of now deploying solutions to those endpoints. Now, before I get started on the PA3, I want to do just a little bit of house cleaning. If you have any questions, everyone is muted at this point in time. I would suggest that you add questions to the question box in your GoToWebinar client. You'll actually see a box set aside for questions, and feel free to go ahead and put any questions. I'll be more than happy to address those questions at the end of this webinar. In addition, I've also added a PDF version of this presentation in handouts. So if you go into handouts, you can actually download onto your local computer a PDF version of this, so you don't have to take notes or anything like that. So with that said, let's go ahead and move on. What I'm going to do is just kind of go through a brief overview of the PA3. Again, this isn't really meant to be a really deep in-depth, because the audience tends to be very wide. Many people are new to this technology, but I wanted to provide a quick, brief overview of it, how it differs from the PA2 and how it compares to the competitive solution outside as well, and kind of show how it really matches up in society and hopefully become a solution tool that you can use when deploying audio and SIP environments moving forward. Now, what I'm going to do is introduce one slide that's going to provide an overview for Fanvil. Again, many of you who are familiar with Fanvil realize that we actually support several solutions into the marketplace. It could really be divided into three separate categories. The first category we have is really what we call the X series, and this is our business phones, and this is probably our most popular device that we have out there. But we also develop on phones something that's outside of business that's focused in on hospitality as well. And this is not a full set of solutions. We have a far more in-depth SKUs, but this kind of gives you a quick high-level overview of the different marketplaces that we address. We have a lot of different colors in both black and white, as well as being able to provide differentiating features into the hospitality series, like incorporating Wi-Fi into many of these hospitality phones. That's something that we're introducing very shortly. Third, besides the third category, is really what we call the I series. And the I series is what we call our intercom series. And the reason why we put this is because when you look at our third endpoint or SIP endpoint product line, we have items that have industrial as well as ruggedized video as well as audio endpoints that address intercom solutions on single button and video solutions, in addition to door access security type solutions, where you can have a keypad that you can enter in a specific code, or perhaps pass along an existing RFID card or key fob that gives you full access into the door. You know, these are products that we've been putting together that addresses really many different environments. We have things that are just located for indoor environments, industrial environments, as well as ruggedized, you know, rain, high humidity type environments to deal with outdoors. And the two products we actually introduced over the last probably month or two is what we call the indoor station. And what the indoor station is really a reformatting of a lot of our phones into a format or a culture, a look that really fits into a multi-dwelling environment. But not only, what we're finding out is not only does it fit well in a multi-dwelling environment, instead of having a phone hanging on the wall, you can actually have something like a flat panel display with some very basic keys like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 that accesses the front desk, or perhaps opens a door entry unit that allows people to come in and enter. But we're actually realizing that this can actually fit into many different applications for people who just want a simple application without the need for a handset, because both of these actually support the speaker phone, so that you can actually dial and have a conversation. And we also have touchscreen versions as well that gives you speed dial. But the focus of this presentation is really what we call the public broadcasting solution. On top here, you'll notice the PA2, which what we call the Swiss Army knife of public announcements. That's probably the largest periphery that hangs off on many of the legacy phone systems, that when you do an upgrade, what do you do with that existing PA speaker that used to be run by the old phone system? And the fact is, you don't really have to upgrade those speakers as well as the existing amplifiers to an IP system. This is an alternative where you can keep the existing infrastructure and be able to add this SIP core, or be able to call in to the PA2 or PA3, which is our brand new product, and be able to address via a SIP call to page that specific set of speakers, which is great. And one differentiating feature that Fanvil introduced is that we also have a management system here that gives you, the integrator or the service provider, the ability to upload specific templated config files to all of these units here, giving you rapid deployment for, you know, for new places, or places that you, if you want to deploy, you don't have to start from ground zero, so that it really saves your time out in the field. So having said that, let me go ahead and get into some of the more product details and overview. Okay, so what is the Fanvil PA3 SIP paging gateway? What it really does is, the way we describe it is that you can provide a SIP core to almost any peripheral device that exists out there. And when you think about applications such as an office building, you know, you have a situation where you can bring up a lift or perhaps an elevator, depending on where you're from, that has a speaker. You know, what do you do when people get stuck inside and you upgrade the communication system from an old system to brand new SIP? Then you can incorporate one of these gateways into the lift that allows you to be able to make a SIP call into the elevator. Conversely, you know, you can put in a parking meter where you can all of a sudden have a gateway that used to be connected via an analog line, that now you can convert that into a SIP gateway with specific connection that allows the person that's stuck at the gate to push a button, provide a SIP call to the main center, and that they could automatically open the gate for you if that's necessary. So these are a lot of the different things we've done, but what we've also done is increase the performance. And one of the things that the PA3 can do that the PA2 can do is to support fixed time MP3 broadcasting, which has a much higher sampling rate that's capable for the PA2. I don't want to knock the PA2 performance down. The PA2 does what it does very, very well, but focusing on just audio applications, we've decided to up the addition of the PA3 to support a higher sampling rate. And the reason being is that one differentiator is that we're able to incorporate a USB or perhaps an RF disc card that you can pop in that could support up to perhaps 32 gigabytes of predefined announcements. So say if you have an emergency announcement, you can kick it off just by pushing of a button that will make that announcement throughout the store. So if you have something that you do, this provides that level of convenience as well. In addition to just making announcements and being able to broadcast to existing amplifiers, you can also use this device similar to the PA2 to support multicasting. Very often when you have a large building with very different offices in between, how do you go ahead and support multicasting in a small environment to make these type of announcements? And from a hosted, SIP solution, you can go ahead and actually dial into up to 2 SIP accounts on this PA3, and then be able to have it interpret that call into a multicast IP address, and then you can have that announcement that broadcasts and any IP device, whether it's our phone or any competitive phone out there that's listening in, to be able to solicit and bring it in. And not only can it exhibit, but this device can also listen in on that broadcast device as well. So I'll get into several different applications as we move forward, but these are the type of enhancements that we've made that put a lot of emphasis on audio. This is just a small spreadsheet of the different types of features that we have. I think, as I mentioned earlier, this can actually support up to 2 programmable keys, but we've also added some features on the PA3 that's not available on the PA2. We were able to put in Opus codec support. So not only to support the G711 and G2022 that both devices can support, but being able to support Opus codec gives the PA3 far more flexibility in addressing offices that perhaps have lower bandwidth for internet connection, so that the whole idea is if you have the large internet connection, it'll give you the highest bandwidth in terms of fidelity and audio. But if you have that lower end bandwidth and then you're competing against a lower internet throughput environment, it will do its best to kind of maintain audio integrity without having skips in voice in doing that. And so as well with the SIP line, we also support 2 SIP keys versus a single SIP key on the PA2. But the biggest difference here is being able to support, the USB interface, of which you can put in, pre-announcements and things like that onto it. And so the way you support it, it supports a PoE enabled, so people can go ahead, plug in a PoE port onto the network, and you can have this device going. And right here. So this is one device of it. And besides having just the one PoE, for those who want an amplified, but you want higher power, you can also put in an additional power here for up to 12 to 24 volts, giving you far more power so that you can power an amp to reach much further distances depending on what your application is. Here is more of a descriptive photo of the different types of peripheries you can go ahead and put in to it. We actually have a 2 button key interface that you could put in. There's a reset key, which is fantastic. It gives you the ability to perhaps reset this. And as well, you are allowed to put in local broadcast and recording videos here, so that, not videos, I mean audio broadcast, to give you that type of capability. But there's also a line in port, where in a line in, you can have things like music background. So if you happen to walk into a shopping center, you can have music playing in the background in real time, or perhaps connecting an audio in a low priority, perhaps multicast environment, where all of a sudden, all the speakers within the store or the shop can play that. And when you want to make an announcement of a sale, it will then take priority and be able to make that announcement, and you can pull back. So we also have audio announcements where you can power a passive speaker, or as well an active speaker that you can power this device with as well. One of the things that you'll realize it can do is that many of the applications you can use this for is using this to drive third-party PA amplifiers for large applications where you have 2 or more speakers. Likely they're all hooked into an amplifier that provides the interface to it. Very often when you walk into a school or perhaps even a hotel environment, you might encounter situations where you have hotel rooms that are driven by 6 speakers with 1 amplifier. You could put this gateway in front of that amplifier, dial into it, and then be able to address your SIP call across that amplifier, which is great. Now, I've noticed a lot of people have come in later on in this presentation. For those who need a soft copy of this presentation, feel free to go to the handout section and download a PDF version on your client, so you don't have to, in essence, jot any notes, and this copy of this is available to you. As I mentioned earlier, small and stylish. The size of this PA3, you can look at 2 decks of playing cards. So for those out there, you could pretty much stack up 2 playing cards on top of each other, and this is the whole size of it. It fits well in a metal case, and in addition to that, it also comes with an auxiliary mini screwdriver as well as a wire connection, so that you can connect easily the wires that fit on the outside peripherals right into these connections right here, so that it really comes as a kit that makes this available to you all around, which is really nice. This is just sort of a repeat in terms of being able to support different pieces. Again, not only can it support passive speakers, but you can actually put this in and hook this up to many line-in amplifiers that exist in the marketplace today, so that you can supplement a lot of those PA announcers right through in with that type of broadcast that you have. So let's go and highlight some features that we may go ahead and do. Again, as I mentioned earlier, we talked about cloud services. You know, very often when a cloud brings in something, you say, wow, you know, you bring in voice, but what else can you do? You can go ahead and bring on a lot of the multicast services from cloud, or be able to make announcements if you dial into that specific extension or DID to be able to make announcements and everything else like that. Clear voice and MP3 broadcast, obviously with the new supporting the new support of MPA encoding, you can now have much higher sampling rates, so that music in the background and your voice will come through a lot more clearer on this thing. Easy to expand, as I mentioned earlier, and deploy. You can have this device, you know, provide broadcasting into speakers or provide multicasting, but at the same time, you could also use this unit for listening in and being able to provide that input into the analog interfaces that exist out there. Easy to maintain and deploy. As I mentioned on my first slide, we have a free management system that we provide to our integrators and service providers out there that give you an automated ability to upload specific config files so that you can configure the unit to work in your specific environment. So all of these nice tools that you could fit into your tool belt that gives you that capability of doing that. Again, this is all being able to allow you to provide a SIP interface into many of the different analog or perhaps legacy digital interfaces that exist out there today. So this all brings in that ability with the PA3, or perhaps supplementing the PA2, depending on what type of application you want to go ahead and incorporate. Again, this is one thing that actually provides a great interface. You can broadcast live music very often in shopping centers. You can go ahead and broadcast live music across several different Opus or G722 codecs that allows you to broadcast these things throughout, and you have much better, how would you say, communication through this device than the PA2, and perhaps above and beyond some comparative reasons on what the competitors can provide. Again, this is another thing where you can actually use this to broadcast live broadcast systems. In the case of school systems, you know, you can couple this PA3 with our X210, which is really one of our broadcast type of telephones that allows you to go ahead and speak into a phone and be able to provide broadcast through emergency broadcast systems, through schools, through hospitals, or through any particular real-time broadcasting across this device. You know, many people use this for train stations to broadcast schedules for any other type of listening environment. In this case, you can also have a TF card, a USB interface that'll allow you to broadcast across horns or anything like that, that be able to provide local audio coverages as well on this. I didn't talk a lot about video on this, but similar to our IP telephones, you can actually couple video linkages onto here and being able to perhaps broadcast video images and make those available for IP phones or other peripheral devices that exist out there. On the PA2, that's more video centric. In fact, from a physical standpoint, the PA2 actually has an Ethernet interface that allows you to use a simple Ethernet cable to connect a specific IP camera directly to it. And that's probably more geared towards a physical video interface versus the PA3, but that linkage is available in case it's something that you need to do. Again, when I talk about remote management, this is just a simple interface. You can go ahead to our support page on our main website and be able to download for yourself remote management system so that you can go ahead and work on it. We also have a hosted system that you can go ahead and remote manage, but we use that specifically for evaluation purposes. So that, we don't want to, in essence, it allows you to go ahead and try out our system to see whether or not it works for you. But when it works, we highly recommend you download the server that we provide free of charge so that you can go ahead and deploy your management system so that you can be responsible for, the reliability and the uptime of the server that you have to manage your systems along as well. So application scenarios. Here's a quick overview or a system outline that kind of tells you where you can kind of put these things. Again, this is sort of a visual representation of what I mentioned earlier. You can have a lot of broadcasting sources, which could range anywhere from a live microphone to mobile phone and FM broadcasting into perhaps an IPPBX that streams into, the PA3. And then the PA3 output can go into several different various devices here, or you can actually use this to preserve as a listening device so that you could also listen in on the inside and be able to provide an indoor prioritization on multicasting environment into these devices as well. So what this really is it enables you to provide a SIP core into many of your environments. Commercial buildings, let's talk about some applications in the commercial buildings. As I talked about earlier, I mentioned a little bit about converting into a particular office, or how about, putting this into an elevator. Very often elevators and parking gates were all connected via analog in the old phone system. And now with the PA3, this gives you the capability of being able to access those endpoints that were not accessible before, that you can use this to kind of connect that into, okay? Again, shopping centers and warehouses, besides announcing sales and things like that available to your customers, you can also use this to amplify ringers. These are things that are done that's capable of supporting in both the PA2 as well as the PA3, but it depends on which application you want. I'll go into the comparisons on a future slide that gives you the direct comparison so that you can pick the solution set that fits your particular application as best as possible. Again, this is great for calling for background music and being able to allow people to access a specific call center. Many people may have intercoms and things like that throughout the warehouse that were connected via analog. You can, in essence, push a button and use that same interface to connect into the main contact center. Again, campuses, the same thing. It's a different environment, but it does allow you to provide live broadcasts and be able to make pre-recorded announcements to the school with the push of a button. So these are those real nice type of environments that you can go ahead and do that is outside of the classic IP phone market. Again, in public places, I mentioned earlier about indoor shopping centers, train stations, bus terminals, etc. These are all the things, environments that you can go ahead and put in that gives you that application to be able to provide connections and enables you to expand your menu of solutions that you could bring in to your end customers as well. Now let's talk about comparison of the PA2 and PA3. As I mentioned earlier, the big difference between these two is that the PA3 gives you that capability of supporting the card, and it provides the ability to do NPA encoding. And as you notice, the sampling rate goes from what was once the 16K sampling rate up to 44.1K sampling rate, given the new output. And with this, if you have video applications or actually a logic application, I would suggest the PA2. And if you don't need that, then I would probably suggest leaning more towards the PA3, which gives you far more audio applications and that type of focus moving forward. You can have a lot of different outputs, obviously, here that you can have, but these are the major comparisons. And when you look at outside of the Fanvil market, other people also provide competitors, but I would look at these particular differentiation, being able to add flexibility and supporting of the codec and being able to support external cards when you look at it. Here's just a quick comparison of some of the popular third-party type of solutions out there. I'm not going to go in detail. You can have this for your reference when you download it, and kind of shows type of features that might for you to be able to fit into your specific application. This is the last slide that I have that kind of goes over a lot of these things. And before I want to say thank you for your time, I want to devote probably the next couple of minutes to addressing any questions that you might have. This is sort of the last piece that I have. What I'll do here is skip over to some of the questions that people have put in so that I can go ahead and talk. One of the questions that state here is it possible to set a time for a message and a timer? No, unfortunately, there is no scheduled time setting for this, so that you can go ahead and set off a time. This can go ahead and supplement it. The idea of the PA2 as well as the PA3 is a very basic device that allows you to do real-time broadcasting, or perhaps being able for you to provide that. But in terms of timing, you might have a school system that might have a timer that might kick off a bell, for example, but there is no timer on the PA3, so sorry about that. How do you deal with audio synchronization in terms of shopping centers with multiple PA modules with the speakers? That's a good question. I think if you have, you can actually broadcast the broadcast in real time, but in terms of updating the synchronization for audio, I got to go ahead and take an action item to see if that can be done to update the MP file on the actual USB card. So for Michael, who addressed that question, feel free to contact me directly. My email address is Tommy, tommy.lee.lee@fanvil.com. I'll go ahead and take the action item to go ahead and address that question, and I'll get right back over to you on that, because I'm not sure. I know we can address synchronization files for the configure of the actual thing, but how do you actually update the audio file? That's a good question for it, but I'll get back to you on that specific question. Anybody else have any questions? Feel free to put in any questions that you might have on that question and that you might have. Or what you can do is, if something that comes up after this webinar, you could send your inquiry to sales@fanvil.com, or you could send it to support@fanvil.com, depending whether it's commercial or technical, and you should get a reply very shortly. Okay. So having said that, I don't see any more questions that are trickling in. I believe many of our channel partners out there have samples of these things in stock. We're just ramping up in production of the PA3. I want to again thank you very much for your time, and you can go ahead and speak to your local representative. If you don't know who the local representative is, I'd suggest you send a quick note or give us a call to sales@fanvil.com, and we'll be more than happy to guide you to the right program as well as promotions onto it. One more question that came in. I wish to use SIP line 1 for line out only, and PA system, and SIP 2 for line in only. I don't want audio from the PA line. Will you require two separate PA3s, one for audio input and one for audio output. No, in fact, the PA3 pretty much behaves like a phone. So when you dial it in, you in essence, whatever you announce to that PA3, it'll go ahead and make your announcement through the output. So instead of making that output through, say, an IP phone speaker or an IP phone handset, it will actually amplify your call. Say if you gave PA3 an extension 101, you can dial 101, and when that PA3 automatically picks up, it'll automatically announce whatever you say to it to the power amplifier or the passive speaker that you have hooked into it. Okay, I hope that addresses your question. If not, feel free to contact me. I'll go ahead and put my contact information in the chat screen on both my telephone as well as my email address, but feel free to contact sales@fanvil.com or support@fanvil.com. Okay, again, thank you very much for your time, and I appreciate your valuable time, and hope you have a wonderful and a healthy day as well as rest of the week. Okay, thank you very much. Bye-bye.